All right, when we look back at the history of databases, there are these moments, these failures, that are just so epic, they completely change how we think about risk. And today, we're going to dive deep into one of the biggest. We're talking about India's Aadhaar system. This is the story of what happens when the world's largest biometric database, a system holding the literal identity of over 1 billion people, starts to spring a leak. Just look at this number for a second. 1.1 billion. It's kind of hard to even wrap your head around, right? I mean, what on earth operates at that kind of scale? Well, that number, it's not data points, it's people. 1.1 billion human beings, every single one of them enrolled in India's national identity system, which is called Aadhaar. And we're not just talking about names and addresses here. No, this is the heavy stuff. We're talking fingerprints and iris scans. And that leads us to the big kind of terrifying question at the heart of this whole story. What happens when you take the most personal, most unchangeable data imaginable from over 1 billion people and stick it all into one single system? What happens when that system starts to break? Okay, so to really get a handle on what went wrong here, you've got to understand just how ambitious this project was. Aadhaar was never meant to be just another database. It was supposed to be the digital bedrock for an entire country's economy, for all its social services. A monumental bet, really. And here's the absolute key thing to remember. Aadhaar is a biometric system. I mean, think about it. You can change your password, right? But you can't change your fingerprint. You can't just go and reset your iris. This is data that once it's out there for good. That makes securing it well monumentally important. Which brings us to 2018. This was the year that this massive bet on digital identity got a huge, sobering reality check. The integrity of the whole system was about to be blown wide open, not by some official government audit, but by journalists. And here's how the story broke. Journalists started digging, and what they found was wild. The question wasn't if you could get your hands on someone's Aadhaar data. The real question was just, how much would it cost? Anonymous brokers were out there openly selling access to all this incredibly sensitive information right on the digital black market. So, faced with these bombshell reports, what was the official response? Pretty much denial. The government came out and said, no, the core biometric data, the really sensitive stuff like fingerprints and iris scans, that has not been breached. They basically drew a line in the sand trying to reassure everyone that the central system itself was totally secure. But the evidence the journalists were turning up, it painted a very, very different picture. We're talking about access to portals, to software that could pull up personal details, even print out fake ID cards. And it was being sold for just a few dollars. So while the government was saying the vault was secure, it turns out the keys to the front door were being sold for pocket change. And this gets us to a really critical point. If you want to understand what really went wrong with Aadhaar, you have to get this one thing straight. This wasn't some story about a single brilliant hacker finding one clever way in. Nope. The problem was so much deeper. It was practically built into the system's DNA. The problem was systemic. The data wasn't stolen in one massive heist. It was more like it was leaking out through thousands of tiny little cracks. This was just a fundamental failure of the database architecture itself and of all the security protocols that were supposed to be protecting it. So what were these core flaws? Well, for starters, you had exposed APIs. Basically, the digital doors that let other programs talk to the database were just left wide open. Then you had really poor access controls. On top of that, the encryption was weak. And maybe most importantly, the oversight was a black box. It was almost impossible to figure out who was accessing what data or when. Now, here's the thing. While the sheer scale of the Aadhaar system is pretty unique, the kind of failure we're talking about, it's not unique at all. In fact, if you look at the history of big databases, this story has some serious echoes. It's part of a much bigger and honestly pretty worrying pattern. Yeah, the Aadhaar exposure didn't just happen in a vacuum. I mean, look at the timeline. It happened right around the same time as other huge data disasters, like the Equifax breach in 2017, and of course, the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal in 2018. These weren't just a string of bad luck. They were all symptoms of the same core problem, with huge, centralized databases. And this really gets to the heart of the lesson here. It doesn't matter if you're a credit bureau, a social network, or a national ID system, the story is always the same. When you centralize that much personal data in one place, your security can't just be good. It has to be damn near perfect. Because the cost of failure, it's just way, way too high. So, what are the lessons here? What can we actually learn from all this? Well, the Aadhaar disaster gives us a really powerful, even if it's painful, blueprint for how we should, and maybe more importantly, how we should not, build the massive identity systems of the future. I love this quote. Biometric data is irreversible. Protect it like nuclear codes. It just frames the stakes perfectly, doesn't it? Like we said, you can change a password, you can cancel a credit card, you can't get a new fingerprint. Once that kind of data is out in the wild, it's out there forever. It's compromised for good, which is why it needs to be protected with the same level of security we'd use for, well, nuclear codes. So out of this whole mess, we can pull 4 really foundational lessons for anyone building a large-scale identity system. Lesson 1, lock down every single API. Every digital doorway needs to be audited, throttled, and secured. 2, encrypt everything by default. It shouldn't even be a question. 3, build public trust. When things go wrong, and they will, you have to be transparent. Denial just destroys confidence. And finally, number 4, you have to balance access with accountability. Every single action taken on the system needs to be logged and auditable, no exceptions. And all of this leaves us with one last, really challenging question to chew on. The story of Aadhaar, and a lot of others like it, really forces us to face this fundamental tension. As we keep building these huge, centralized identity systems for the sake of efficiency and security, are we accidentally creating a world where true, absolute privacy just can't exist anymore? It's a big question, and it's definitely something we're thinking about.